You're listening to C-Suite Unplugged, a podcast by the Business Council of Alberta, where the province's top executives share their career story, what's happening at their companies, and speak candidly about the most pressing business issues. I'm your host, Adam Legge, and in each episode, I sit down with Alberta's leading CEOs, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders to explore their path to the top and what they're focused on right now. Enjoy the show. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Adam. I'm happy to be here.
Karen, why don't we start by having you introduce yourself and WCD?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. My name is Karen Brookman, obviously. I'm the president and CEO of WCD, maybe more known as West Canadian Digital to many people. I am the second generation leader in our family business, and we are going through a big transformation. So I'm leading our 70-year-old business from historically being a digital printing and information management company to being a leader in back office optimization. And maybe I just in simple terms for people that don't know what that means, our tagline is kind of build a better back office, but really in simple terms, what we're doing is helping companies to automate their back office through digitization, workflow automation, and now AI-enabled solutions.
So, Karen, what do you lump in that quote unquote back office? What's encompassed in all of that?
So we work quite broadly. I would say one of the areas we excel is in sort of the financial side. So we do a lot of work with automating check and statement and invoicing processing and moving that into more of a digital model. We work across HR. We also work in more traditional centers like land departments, records management. We work in admin. So really across anything that would be not customer facing. So sort of the back office of big organizations.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, with that stage set, let's talk a little bit more about you. People love to hear sort of the CEO journey. So let's start with your very first job. What was your first real paycheck? What did it teach you about work and leadership that you still carry forward today?
Sure. Well, my first job, in all honesty, I was 15, and not surprising, it was at WCD. But at that time, the company owned a photo finishing lab called West Canadian Color that was down on 10th Avenue. Both my sister and I worked at the front counter from a pretty young age. I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that I learned a lot about leadership in that job, but I would say that we definitely learned about work ethic and accountability and servicing customers. And, I think we were raised that I think in anything we did, you needed to bring 100%. My parents said, we don't care what you do in your life or what your career path is, but, show up on time and give 100%. So I think that's really what it taught us is, the concept of earning a paycheck and working hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Give everything you've got to whatever it is you choose to do. I totally agree with that philosophy. And wow, how times have changed in terms of the photo finishing. No,
Yeah.
don't see a lot of that anymore. So, and we're going to get
Yes.
into more of that from the WCD business overall. But so let's talk about the journey to CEO. Take us from young Karen Brookman. You got your high school diploma in your hand, the whole world in front of you. What was your path from high school graduation to you did some work in Ontario and now leading WCD? Tell us a bit about your journey.
Sure. So I would say my journey to becoming a CEO has had a lot of twists and turns. I think like any entrepreneur, it has not been a straight line. Let me start just quickly at the beginning in terms of, I think, my destiny ultimately to lead our family business. So, as you know, I was born in Calgary. When I was growing up, my dad was in the real estate development business and he worked for ATCO. He worked for Ron Southern, who he absolutely loved and admired. My mom was an artist and used to tour students through the Glenbow Museum. So at a really young age, I was kind of surrounded by two influences, sort of business and entrepreneurialism and creativity and the artist community. And then, when I was about 4 or 5, my dad used to take me to work with him on the weekends. And he was building office buildings. So I had a small hard hat and he would take me down to the construction sites and I'd meet the workers and he'd talk about the projects and
Awesome.
talk about business issues. And I would say that was probably my first business education. Fast forward when I graduated from high school, it was the 80s. So I decided that the best career path for me was to go into the fashion industry, which in my mind at the time was, kind of bold and glamorous and would somehow combine this idea of business and creativity into a career path. I ended up going to Ryerson, Toronto, which at the time was the only school in Canada really that offered a pretty robust degree program. And the interesting part about that was my father at times said to me, okay, let me be clear. You have two choices when you graduate from high school. One is you're going to Toronto to go to school, or two is you're staying home, you're working, and you're paying rent. The funny part was at the time it landed as very harsh. But today, the undercurrent was he really believed that both my sister and I needed to go out and live in another part of the country because he believed we wouldn't understand what a great country we have. And that really changed me. I think moving away from home, going to school, and ultimately starting my career out east, I became very independent and I had a real identity that was separate and apart from my family, which I
Mm.
took a lot of pride in. So, in simple terms, I did graduate from Ryerson. I actually worked in the fashion industry for a few years, traveled to Hong Kong, learned a lot about international manufacturing. It was very interesting to me. I later kind of pivoted and worked for a company called Watt International. And Don Watt, who was an incredibly visionary leader, really was the inventor of private label programs.
Mhm.
So, started programs like President's Choice, Great Value, Equate, like a lot of the private label programs you'd see in the grocery stores today. He started that.
Interesting.
And he gave me a big opportunity when I was pretty young. So I managed the Walmart account and worked with retailers in Brazil and Argentina and Mexico. It's sort of standardizing on these brand programs. So I was well on my way. And then I would say there was sort of a family pivot. And the family pivot was WCD had a sales office in Toronto. And my father came to Toronto and said, listen, I just want to let you know we're going to close this office and I won't be coming to Toronto as much. And I remember very clearly saying to him over dinner, I said, you're crazy. You have an office in the biggest market in the country and you're going to close it. I said, there's got to be something you could do with this office. So, true to form, about 6 months later, he came back and called me and said, I have an opportunity. The company had won some or negotiated the rights to some software to sell into the legal market. And the opportunity was to convert the sales office into a new business, a new company that I could potentially run. It was a huge fork in the road for me at the time. I was in my late 20s and I was on a very good career path and had no interest in going back into the family business whatsoever.
Yeah.
But it was also an opportunity to build a company from the ground up. And so that is really where I started. And so I became a shareholder, a partner, a president of that business. And I had a great partner in it, Martin Felsky, who worked with me for many years. And we built that company up to really an industry leading company with offices across Canada. We had 85 employees at our peak. And we were in the evidence management business. So we worked with large law firms and the federal government. And then basically in 2014, we sold that company to Rico Canada. And I guess the rest is kind of history because that really put me on a path to returning to Calgary.
Yeah. Well, tell us about that path and taking over as CEO of WCD.
Interestingly, after we sold the business to Rico Canada, I ended up being a member of the executive team, and which was a wonderful experience. And I think a great leadership training ground because that was the first time I'd really worked in sort of a multinational global company. And it was a very different scale than I had worked at before. And so I learned a lot. But after about 3 or 4 years, I would say I started to feel like I really want to return to my roots in private business. I want to become an entrepreneur again. So I started down the path of looking for what might be a new opportunity. I think that's sort of the full circle moment because right around that time, I had some business in Calgary and I ended up going out for dinner with my dad, and we were talking about WCD. And he was working on a succession plan. He wanted to step back from the business. He felt like it needed some new blood, a new generation of leadership. And the plan was not going very well. So he wasn't feeling really good about the transition. For me, it was a bit of a light bulb moment where I looked at him and I said, "Listen, what if I came home? What if we moved back to Calgary and I, bought into the business and, I know this business. I'd love to lead this next generation." And so we did. And, it wasn't all easy. It was a difficult transition, but about a year later, we moved back and really restored the business to a full family business. So I now work in the company with my father's the chairman, George is the chairman. My husband Alan is our CFO, and Jennifer is our vice president. And it's a great team.
That's
And
that.
I'm the CEO, obviously.
Yeah, no, that's a full on Brookman enterprise there for sure, which is awesome. That's I mean, what a journey, Karen. I mean, moving to Ontario, fashion industry, food products and private label stuff, and then back into the family business. That's an
Yeah.
amazing journey. You mentioned your dad, George Brookman, well known, larger than life, wonderful person, wonderful Calgarian, wonderful Albertan. He's left a strong mark on, I would say, Calgary's community. How has his example impacted your leadership and your journey?
Well, I think it's impacted us tremendously. I mean, he is extremely passionate about Calgary. And in fact, many times we think that, the whole purpose of building WCD really was to be in a position to enable him to spend more time working in the community. So, but I think he's had many strong messages over the years, but one was, for every hour and every dollar you give to the community, you'll get 10 back. And he really believes that, and I mean, he spent 40 years working with the Stampede and the Rotary Club and other organizations, and he loves it. It's his greatest joy in life. And I think that has definitely rubbed off on not only me and our family, but also our employees. So, certainly when I moved back to Calgary, one of the first things we did is look at, where can I get involved and how, very quickly, there's always opportunities in Calgary. I mean, Calgary's an incredibly welcoming place. And so very quickly I was able to get involved with Heritage Park and other organizations, Stampede, et cetera. And it's been amazing. So I think it's been very influential.
Yeah, I often refer to him as Mr. Calgary. He's just got that
Yes.
spirit in him for the community. Karen, every leader, even up at the C-suite, has mentors and guides that help shape their thinking and they go to for wisdom. Who do you count amongst your mentors and guides?
Well, definitely. I think, all successful leaders, I think, have people that have mentored them or influenced them over the years. So certainly my father, I mean, as I've mentioned, has been a big mentor to me. But, I would say going back, the business partner I had in Commonwealth Legal, Martin Felsky, was a lawyer, very successful entrepreneur as well. He was older than me. He'd been a partner at a major law firm when we joined forces. And, he taught me a lot. I mean, he taught me about looking long term, being more, I think, researched in decision making. He really taught me about strategy. So he was a wonderful mentor and he had a great sense of humor. So I think about him often and we're still in touch. And then, I've had others. I've had an executive coach, Bill Stevens, for probably 20 years, that used to be a professor at University of Toronto. I think over my life, I always enjoy having people available to help me check my thinking and help me with through different situations. And then, I think the other thing I would say is I was involved with entrepreneurs organization. So, peer to peer learning and mentoring, and Adam, even BCA, really. I mean, I think being in a network of very successful business leaders, you almost learn just through osmosis, talking to people about what they're going through and situations they're navigating. So lots of sources, and I enjoy all of those learnings that I get from other business leaders.
That's so true. It's a peer network in many ways. You can talk about the realities and challenges. I hear it very often. It's lonely at the top because you don't have some of those lateral relationships in an organization. So you have to
Yeah.
look exterior to your organization to make those happen. Yeah. Karen, what do you do outside the office? What keeps you energized and inspired? Hobbies when you're not working. What will people find you doing?
Well, I always love this question because, I'm not very good at life balance. So I would say I live a really integrated life. So my work, my family, my personal life is deeply integrated. And when I do have time outside of work, I really appreciate it and value it. So I think there's a few things. I mean, my husband and I, we love to travel, of course, like many people, and we make a real commitment. We actually sit down January 1st every year. We plan our kind of our travel and our vacation first, so that we know that we've got time in our calendar that will be, non-negotiable and really important for us as a couple and as a family.
That's awesome.
We love to sail. So,
Interesting.
my husband Alan was actually a professional sailor for much of his life. In his youth, he sailed the America's Cup, and that's taken us all over the world. And we still have ownership in a sailboat in Toronto. So I love being on the water. I think it just gives you a great perspective. Anytime I get on the water, I love it. And then, I would say walking. So I love to walk. I love it for exercise. I love it for kind of meditation. I love to listen to audiobooks, and I just finished the Camino Trail in Spain,
Yeah, very
which
exciting.
was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Loved it. Just did a small one. It's only 300 kilometers, but very life-changing experience.
Tell us about that, your Camino trek. What was the experience like, and did it awaken any new ideas or
It
insights
did.
in life? Yeah.
Well, I think what was the most interesting, first of all, I've never done a trip like that. It's very simple because you take the absolute minimum, because mostly you're carrying on your back, what you need, and you just get up and walk 4 to 5 hours a day. And to see a country through that lens is it's a very interesting perspective. But I think what I enjoyed the most about it, it was truly off the grid. The Camino Trail is originally a spiritual pilgrimage. So there's people are doing the walk for lots of different reasons, and you meet people from all over the world. What I really liked, and this is kind of a funny story, was about 5 days in, I woke up and I did the walk with my aunt, and I said to her, I feel like my brain is empty. And, we started laughing. And I said it was the first time I can remember in years where I wasn't contemplating something, ruminating on something, worrying about something, planning something, because I'd worked through it over while we were walking. And, that day we just had the most amazing day because we were so present, and we enjoyed the sights. We had great conversation. And by the time I came back, I felt so re energized, and I had lots of new ideas for the business that I never would have thought of if I hadn't kind of done this walk. And candidly, I've said to all my staff, I said, plan something like this because it really gives you a different perspective, and it gets you on the balcony, and out of the weeds of your business day to day.
Yeah, that must be pretty cool feeling to not have that chatter,
Great.
that monkey mind going on all the time, right?
Yeah.
I'll have to give that a try. Let's pivot to the company. So you are your second generation leader of a family business. Tell us what's that like? There's many different realities to just running a company with no family ties and legacy, but tell us what that entails in terms of any different approaches or perspectives or pressures that brings.
So, I think on your best day, it's an absolute honor and privilege to run a family business because it's so naturally filled with purpose. And I think, this idea that you can do this work with people that you love, that you trust, that you can, create this future for yourselves and your employees is really a wonderful endeavor. I think it's wonderful. It's also, it's challenging because it's family and business. When I moved back, it was, again, without getting into too much detail, it was interesting because my father was ready. He was ready to pass the reins. So we thought. And then I got here and he said, I think I've decided I'm going to stay on as CEO. And I thought, okay. But what I learned through all of that, and this comes up a lot in family business because we're in a lot of family business forums, is that the dynamics in family business between generations is very significant. It's actually not about a job transition. It's about legacy. It's about your position in the family. It's your relationships in the community. And so I think once I understood that better, then we were able to do a much more thoughtful transition. And it ultimately took us about 2 years. And now I would say we are stronger and closer than ever. in how we work together and sort of marrying up that legacy and history with allowing for, a fresh perspective and a new direction and new ideas.
Hmm. It's not easy to ride those two horses of legacy and innovation, right? I think
No.
that's the unique aspect that I think every family enterprise has to somehow focus on, and I really respect family operations that are able to do that because it's not
Mhm.
easy. Yeah.
I think the other thing I would say is that, there are definitely days, and for anybody that's listening that is in family business, it's a heavy responsibility, and there are days when you realize, look, failure is not an option. I think days of going through the pandemic and other moments where you think we have to find our way because there's too many people that you are taking care of and that are part of your family that will be impacted. So it's a commitment. It's not something you do lightly.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen, you've really shifted the business from when you came to Calgary and took it over to what it is today. You've really, well,
Mhm.
I'll let you tell it, but you've really
Yeah.
sharpened and streamlined and sort of moved on from certain legacy businesses. But I mean, tell us a little bit about the shift and some of the how you assess the company, the opportunities, what was the right thing to keep going on, and what were the things to transition out of. Tell us about that.
I think when I look back on my career, interestingly enough, I've kind of taken a career path where we were often taking sort of traditional ways of working or methodologies and trying to innovate them or reinvent them. And that obviously started in my career in the legal industry, which was, implementing massive change in a law firm to embrace technology as a way of reviewing legal documents. So when I returned to West Canadian, I would say, day one, we've had a very successful business. And so day one was really just observing what are we doing well and what's working and what are the opportunities to evolve it. The West Canadian story is an interesting one because we have been constantly reinventing the company over 70 years. But I think when I came in, I could see immediately that we had opportunities where we could truly innovate and bring something new to market. It's interesting because I'll use like a very simple example, but it's a great example.
Mhm.
So we have for decades managed mailrooms inside of big corporations, which is a pretty simple model. We staff it, we bring in equipment and we manage the mail. But interestingly, one of the things that we kind of uncovered was the volume of information that is actually coming in, even today, through these mailrooms, particularly with people working remotely. So everything from shipments to legal documents to compliance documents are all still coming in through these very traditional routes. And so we said, okay, what do you do about this? What's the future of this? Right? Like this can't possibly look the same way in 5 years. And so last year we launched an AI enabled digital mailroom. I kind of jokingly said we're bringing sexy back to mailrooms, but it was a great example where we looked at there's something here. Nobody really wants to talk about it, but there's something here. And so now we can basically digitize any documentation that's coming into the company and we can automatically route it into things like the accounting system or it can be distributed to particular custodians if it's in the legal department. We have AI that brings in summaries of what type of information is coming in. We can reduce the footprint so that there's less cost involved in these areas of the business. So, I mean, very simple. But we're always looking for these little gems of, how can we help make a smarter back office? How can we do this differently in this new world?
Yeah, and I know there are aspects of the business that you also didn't continue, like I think a lot of the printing
Yeah.
and some of the like the direct mail stuff. So tell us, what was your filter for worth pursuing and innovating, but
Yeah.
also not worth pursuing?
Well, I think in really simple terms, like if I go back 20 years, our business model, the operations and the sales were very closely aligned across the entire company. And what happened over the last 10 years was the business started to get a bit siloed, and it was just the way the industry was evolving. So we ended up getting to a place where we felt like we were running five separate companies. And we said, we can't run five unrelated companies. It doesn't make sense. There's no,
Yeah.
we're constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul. We have to make a decision about what the future of this company is.
Right.
So we had a large commercial print operation that we were very proud of, and we had done some really great things with that business. Actually, we'd taken it into the e-commerce space. But when we looked at the print business was a very capital intensive business, and companies that are still in printing today are investing more, not less. So they're going more automated, more digital, more capacity. And a lot of that is getting centralized. So, it used to be you'd buy from your printer down the street, but now, you can buy online, you could buy from a printer in Montreal and they could ship it to you.
Right. Yeah.
So we said, I don't think this is our future, and I don't think this is where we want to invest. So we made the decision to divest of it. We were very fortunate because our capability ended up being very attractive to a company in the East that specialized in e-commerce digital printing. So they wanted a national footprint. So interestingly, we still do a lot of managed print. So we still do a lot of event activation. We still work with big companies in managing big campaigns. But now we work with partners, print partners, and it's changed the model. It's much more asset light. It's much more focused on, specialized capabilities.
Yeah.
So I actually think we're providing a better service to our customers with less capital expenditure than we were before. So far, 1 year later, we all feel like we made a really good decision.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Great to see that evaluation process, as you say. What's the right thing to pursue? What's the right thing
Yeah.
to
It wasn't easy, I'll tell
divest?
you.
I can imagine. Yeah, because you've got legacy, and we talked earlier about the legacy and the innovation, right? Those are sometimes you don't want to put the horse to pasture, right? And but
No,
it's
and
probably the right thing to
relationships,
do.
all of it. Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
absolutely.
Karen, you work with many businesses in different industries and workflows. Like from a macro, big picture standpoint, what are some of the biggest shifts you're seeing in how companies work today? And is that basically your blueprint for how you then determine the service offering that you're gonna put together?
Yes, I mean, I think we're really trying to pay very close attention to trends and also what is short term and what is going to stick long term, because sometimes things aren't permanent change, if you know what I mean. But so I would say the biggest change we've seen is really the way employees are working today. This whole concept of remote and hybrid work and the relationship to office services. It's kind of no longer about where somebody sits. It's sort of where information needs to go. So I think this idea of kind of building intelligent, connected workspaces that are not necessarily the traditional office space is really, I think, fascinating, kind of where we see the future for ourselves and for our customers. So that's really where I think we are focusing. So WCD, one of our capabilities, which is sort of interesting, is for 20 years we've been in the document scanning business, which is interesting because when I first got back into the company, I thought, are we still doing scanning? Like, how long can this last? We're scanning more now than we did 20 years ago. Or we're just scanning
Really?
millions of pages of paper.
Wow.
Where is it coming from? Well, where it's coming from is all these new models that are coming out that are AI driven need to be populated with information. And so people are looking at records that they haven't looked at before, like land files, like
Mm.
maps, like drawings, like contracts, and saying, let's populate these into our systems so that we can draw out the intelligence to help us be more, obviously more efficient and use more analytics in the data for our business. We're really seeing this kind of migration, and we still see opportunities to kind of help companies over that hump. So, yes,
And
lots of interesting opportunities.
that's interesting. I didn't even factor or think about the notion that we're trying to populate or cram all of this stuff that may historically have been just on paper into these AIs and large language model systems so that they can then use that as an intelligence base. That I guess I had assumed that was already digitized, and I just given
Yeah.
the world of everything seems to be coming around in PDFs and docu-signs and all that I just didn't think you'd be actually scanning more than rather
Yeah.
than less. That's really
It's a
interesting.
real combination. And I think it's interesting about a company like us because we're not a startup, and yet we are very innovative, and yet we've got this history. And I think one of the things that has really differentiated us is that we navigate both worlds. So we can go into a company and say, we see where you're still using, manual or paper-based processes, and we can start by automating those for you as an entry point. And by the way, we can help bring your people along so that we're not just, completely disrupting what's happening to people in the workplace,
Mhm.
but also we can put you on a path to make this, completely automated, completely electronic and digitized down the road. So, and I like that. I think it makes us very unique that we have this breadth of capability.
Yeah. Karen, is that something that sort of the innovation in WCD and looking for new ways to support clients, is that something you try and embed throughout the organization, or is that more of a more senior strategic set of functions that you and some of the executive team have, or is this something you really embed through the entire organization? And how do you do that, if so?
I would say right now we're definitely embedding it across the organization. I love working on strategy. I love going to conferences, reading about what the latest trends are, understanding new technology. I mean, I love doing that. But I love also getting perspectives from young people that have completely different point of view than I do and have grown up in a world where they know nothing else but technology. It's interesting because after we divested of the print business, we actually flattened the organization a little bit. So we have probably the largest senior management team we've had in a long time with about 12 people on it. And we did that deliberately because I said, I feel like we really need to bring some new thinking into our new direction and where we're going. That may not be forever, I think, but I think right now it's working extremely well because there's a huge level of engagement across our team, and everybody is really, I think, engaged and kind of inspired because we've got some really interesting new people bringing great ideas to the table about where we could go. So, yeah, I think it's a big part of our culture is collaboration and ideation.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great to see that embedded through the entire culture of the organization. If you look kind of macro at some of the things that you're helping your clients with, are there some common threads of what businesses are perhaps still doing that's a bit of an outdated model, that they could be doing different sort of digital solutions, or is there a common solution set that you're typically implementing? I'm curious of sort of in the spirit of, if you could advise other companies of some things to think about, what might that be?
I feel like we're in this really interesting time right now where you go into any big enterprise and there's sort of a frantic adoption of AI and new technology initiatives and there's a kind of a buzz of activity and information gathering going on. And then there's another part of the organization that I feel like is almost paralyzed because it's like things are moving so fast and they're so disruptive that they're not sure what to do and where to start. And I think it will settle. Like I feel like we're gonna, in the next year or two, where things are gonna get a little bit clearer because there's so much disruption in what's occurring. But interestingly for us, what we find is even if the technology side of a big enterprise company is very advanced, there are a lot of pockets that are using legacy technology, sometimes proprietary technology, and manual processes. And I would say the biggest area that we tend to focus on is in finance, which is not entirely surprising because I think the finance groups tend to be a little bit risk averse. They've got a lot of history in their systems. They like to work a certain way. They're very methodical. So transitioning those departments to be more automated, to think differently about how they work. So we do a lot of work with the government, provincial government. We do a lot of work with big enterprise customers. And again, it's just looking at how can you move away from, manual checks, manual statements, manual invoices, and move into something fully automated and electronic.
Yeah, I think you're right. That I know things are changing so fast that it is easy just to stand there like deer in headlights and
Yeah.
wait for the train to pass. But yeah, I think technology is not likely to slow down anytime soon. Karen, WCD's commitment to community is quite strong, and you sort of referred to George's belief in community. But tell us about what WCD does in terms of community engagement and community involvement and support, and how is that part of the culture of the organization?
It's certainly part of who I am as a leader, and so I think it starts at the top that we do believe very much in investing and participating in the community. It's definitely part of our culture as a company. I would say that, I mean, obviously we have plans around that as a company in terms of what we support and what we get engaged in, but we've also been really over the last few years encouraging kind of the next generation, our middle managers to get more involved and to tell us what they're interested in and what they want to volunteer for, or what they'd like to support. And we've got quite a range. So we do everything from things with women in business. We're a big supporter of pride in business. And actually, that started with Rob Steed, who's one of our vice presidents, has been with us for 25 years. And, he has a real passion about that group. And we said, well, let's get behind it. So he's very active in that. More recently, we've been sponsoring and supporting 7 over 70. So kind
Oh,
of the
yes,
other,
yes, yeah,
which I absolutely love. That is just
yeah.
such a fantastic event. So, yeah, I mean, it's something it's just kind of inherent in what we do every day. I mean, people are always talking about, I'd like to get involved in this. And we're like, let's do it.
7 over 70. It's a great
Oh, it's so good.
riff
Yeah.
off the 40 under 40, which is awesome. So, Karen, as a CEO, what keeps you up at night? It can be both from an opportunity, but also a risk standpoint. What sort of when you're walking the trails of the Camino, what were you processing?
I think right now, I feel like what keeps me up at night, like on one hand, is we just are kind of in a world right now of a lot of economic uncertainty. Like it's really hard when interest rates are fluctuating, and I mean, never mind tariffs, but even real estate prices. Like there's just a lot of uncertainty, which makes it hard to plan long term and to manage risk in a business.
Yeah.
I feel like we've been really forced to work short term more recently than I'd like, and to kind of react to situations
Yeah.
more than being proactive on the long term.
Yeah.
I also just feel like this kind of backdrop of the speed of change in the world right now, and obviously hugely driven by AI, but just change. And it's one thing when I think about our company and sort of saying, okay, we're in this new world of AI and we're gonna move that direction, and we're gonna look at it from every angle, not only from a customer, but from our back end of our business. But it's also when it's moving so quickly, it is hard for people to adapt. And it's hard for our staff to adapt. So that keeps me up a little bit at night. Like you feel like you're going to fall behind. Like everything's moving so fast. I go, are we moving fast enough? Are we moving fast enough? But then I think, are we doing it well? Are we? The other thing I would say is, as a business that is in Alberta, we have for many years the energy sector is the backbone of this community, obviously, and our economy here. And I think one of the things that we've observed lately is that I think the energy sector, my impression is that there's a real focus on obviously on shareholder value and profitability after many years of volatility. And it used to be that there was a pretty deep commitment to buy local, to invest in local companies, to work together with local companies. And I'm really finding that shifting.
Hmm.
And so it means we have to be smarter and better and more competitive than we've ever been. It's not as strong as our community is, there's other factors at play that we have to be on our game, and we have to be looking beyond this community in terms of how we're going to grow.
Yeah, I think we're all over seeing just a greater emphasis on value and cost effectiveness. So yeah, it looks to, as you say, you got to be competitive and nimble and responding to that. Karen, how are Alberta and Canada positioned as a place to continue being your base of operation? Are there policies, regulations, taxes, etc., that you think need to be changed in order to be an even better place for a business?
I would say it goes without saying, I am a very proud Canadian. I love having our business headquartered in Alberta, and I love servicing customers across Canada. And I feel very optimistic about Alberta, and I feel very optimistic about the country, despite everything that's happening. I think if I think from more of a Canadian perspective, more has to change. I think there's policies in place, and you know them better than anybody, that still have not been turned over or have not shifted and need to.
Hmm.
But I do feel that, what's happened south of the border has been a wake-up call. And I feel like in conversations I have with colleagues across the country, there is a groundswell for Canada to break down barriers within our own country, to look for new trading partners, to focus more on innovation. And so I feel optimistic. I feel like this is maybe a catalyst for change on a positive note. I would say I always feel optimistic about Alberta. We're an incredibly resilient province that seems to
Yeah.
always find our way through. And by the way, the world does need more energy. I mean, now more than ever with AI.
Energy, more
So
food, et cetera. Yeah.
more food, more agriculture, more technology, and we've got it all. So I feel very optimistic there. I don't like our new license plate, but other than that,
Fair enough.
I feel great. I choose to be optimistic.
Yeah, I always like that about you, Karen. You're very optimistic and positive, and every challenge is an opportunity for you. I know that, which is a great philosophy and outlook to have in life. And so, what excites you about the future of WCD? What's next on the horizon that gets you jumping out of bed in the morning?
I'm really excited about our business right now. I'm probably more excited about it than I've been in 7 years. Like there's a little bit of, I go back to 25 years ago, starting Commonwealth Legal, and, we were in the heart of the .com time where the internet was just being launched and Google and everything else. And we were in the game, and we built a great company because there were so many opportunities coming our way. And I feel like we're right there right now. So it's scary. Things are changing very fast. There's an economic uncertainty, but at the same time, there's unbelievable opportunity. And we are in the game. So we set our company up now to really focus on new offerings, being more innovative, adopting AI across the organization. And I think we need to keep going. I think there's going to be all sorts of opportunities opening up. So and I feel really good about our team. We've got a great team right now. So yeah, we don't have it all figured out. I think we're still in formulation on some of our growth plans, but we're doing well. We're having a good year. And so we're feeling really optimistic about the future.
That's a great note to end on. But before I do, Karen, anything you want to leave with listeners that we didn't cover, and you want to make sure they take away from your conversation here?
I knew you were going to ask me that. And I think the only thing I would leave you with is something I've learned over the last few years. And that is that I have learned that there is not a challenge that cannot be solved. And, I think as we've gone through, a lot of volatility over the last 5 years, and, certainly as a family business where we said we have to get through this no matter what, I've learned that sometimes the very challenges that come your way are catalysts for positive change.
Mm,
I would leave you with whatever's coming your way, or for any of us as business leaders right now, stay curious, stay committed, and there is going to be light at the end of the tunnel and big opportunities ahead.
that's a great perspective. Every challenge is a springboard for the opportunity that comes from it. So that's awesome. Well, Karen, thank you so much for your insights, your wisdom, your leadership, both in the community at WCD and in BCA. We've just been so lucky to have you as part of our fold in our organization. So thank you for joining me today. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks, Adam.
You've been listening to C-Suite Unplugged. As always, it's a privilege to spend some time with the leading executives of our membership. Thank you to our guests this month for sharing their journey and insights. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to review and share the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time with more unfiltered leadership stories from the C-Suite.